Just testing to see what the bouncing is doing. Testing to see what the bouncing is doing. Up higher, up higher.
I didn't want to take whatever was, and I had, since I had that money coming in, I could be a little selective. So I learned to play golf and just waited for something to come up that looked right. Yeah, that was after I had done the national company, right, of Cambridge. So I played golf for about 8 months. A couple of little things came up. I remember they were doing a television series, and I didn't really. An agent in New York had told these people, the producers of the show, about me. So they called an agent out here they knew, and that agent got in touch with me and wanted to know if I would be interested in doing a series. And I said, well, yeah, maybe. So this guy said, well, you mind if I represent you? I said, go ahead. So anyway, it got down to, I read the script, and I didn't like it too much. They were dickering back and forth. It got down to where it was going to be two guys, me or the other guy. And I called the agent and I said, look, they haven't got any problem at all. I said, I bow out. I don't even want it. Turned out to be, it was Sergeant Preston of the Yukon that Dick Simmons did. And I just didn't want to get started in a series like that, where the dog and the horse knew more than you did. So I turned it down. The agent said, geez, you're out of your mind, But anyway, I had this agent whom I had gone in to see one day. I just finally asked the guy, I said, look, who's a good agent? Because all this period I didn't have one really, I said, who's a good agent that has nobody like me, that has a couple of ends at 20th Century Fox. One, because in New York they'd wanted to do a screen test on me in New York, and I wouldn't let them, because in New York they just weren't set up to do screen tests. And I also knew about the problems between New York offices and West Coast offices, because whatever New York wants, they don't want, and whatever, vice versa. Yeah. So I didn't do it in New York, and I figured I'm going to do my working in Hollywood, so I just didn't do it. So I knew I had an in anyway. So a guy mentioned this agent to me, a guy named Red Hershon, and I went into his office and told him what I'd done, and I said, told him that they'd wanted to do a screen test on me in New York, and did he have an in at 20th? And he said, yeah, because he did. His secretary was, his girlfriend was, I think, his annex secretary. So he had an in. So I said, okay, fine, you want to handle me? And he said, yeah. And so he did. I did the screen test at 20th with Rita Moreno, as a matter of fact. It's pretty bad, very bad. They didn't take me. And then I was, what was I doing? Oh, I did, Dick Bear, the director, was out at Warner Brothers, and they were doing screen tests of a whole bunch of guys in town for the Cheyenne series. And that day they had tested Clint Walker, but they weren't sure. They were testing guys, like all week. So I happened to be in a bar with old Bob Lowry, who I had done the King Mutiny with, and Dick Bear had come in that night after testing, and they introduced us. And nothing. We sat there and had a few drinks, and I left. And I remember that night I had met Jonathan Winters. He was in there that night. First time I'd ever met him. And nobody knew really who he was, and he'd doing a couple of Colgate comedy hours or something. But anyway, the next day, Dick Bear said, gee, that guy I met last night, he might test for this. So he looked all over for me, couldn't remember the name. Finally got hold of him. Bob Lowry a couple of days later and asked Bob, and Bob called me, and I finally got out there, and they had just signed Clint to do it. So he said, well, would you be interested in doing a part? And I said, yeah. So I did what I call the irate lieutenant in the first episode of Cheyenne.
Got that on a rerun not too long
Oh, sorry about that.
ago. What's that?
But I did a lot of irate lieutenants and captains and things like that, and a couple of Cheyennes and what have you out there after I'd done that one. Then they wanted to screen test me, and I said, what for? And they said, well, we want to see what you can do. I said, you've been hiring me and paying me money, and 4 or 5 shows out here to do them. Now what do you want to screen test me for? I said, well, we're testing a lot of people, and so well, I'm not for it, but all right. So, but I made them do it in 10 days. In other words, they had to, once I did it, they had to let me know in 10 days. And because I'd gone through the 20th thing where they hang on for a month before they finally tell you whether you have it or not. So you're really kind of like an option. I can't do anything else really. I could work maybe in a show or something, but if something else came along in that period, I couldn't take it because now I'm stuck waiting for them. So I said, in 10 days, if you can't tell me in 10 days, forget it. They said, okay, in 10 days. So I did the test. I did a test from a Rainmaker. Marvelous young girl. I can't remember her name. She was great. Anyway, 10 days comes along. It's like on a Friday or something, and they called me and said, look, we'd like to have another week, to make up your mind. I said, forget it. If you can't make up your mind now, you won't make it up in a week. I've done all the work. I've done the test. I've done everything. And I said, no. So they called back in about an hour and said, okay, we're going to put you on a contract. So I said, okay, fine. And as a matter of fact, I think I was the only one out of the group that they did. And I thought they should have put Michael Landon was tested the same day. They tested 15 people in one day. And Mike Landon tested the same day. I thought they ought to put him under contract. But they didn't. They weren't particularly interested in what I thought. So anyway, I was under contract, $175 a week. And I did a lot of nitty things out there, a television show, a bit part, a heavy, whatever,
All TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I did, the first part I did in a picture was Toward the Unknown with Bill Holden, which was an absolute bomb. And then the next one was another bomb with Tab Hunter and Natalie Wood that was on last week on television every night, where I played the antagonist to our hero. It's called The Girl He Left Behind. I have another name for it. Then I did, I don't remember what I did. Oh, I did a thing called Shootout at Medicine Bend with Randy Scott. Now they'd up me to like first feature billing. Gosh, I was just, well, that one was hidden somewhere. Nobody ever saw that, especially me. Then along came Sayonara, whom I had done all the testing for the girls and everything in Sayonara, doing the Brando part. I was busy all the time out there. I did Mexican voices. I don't speak Spanish. I did, all kinds of voices, whatever. They kept me busy all the time. They got me for nothing, and rather than call in somebody that cost them $200 and something a day or $100 a day or whatever to do a voice or look like a log standing in the background, well, I did it, And so Sayonara came along, and after doing all the testing, and it also it introduced me to Josh Logan and what have you before, because they thought they were going to try to get Audrey Hepburn to play the Japanese girl. Well, if they did that, they were going to use her, and they were going to use an unknown in the other part. But if they didn't get the girl, they got Brando and used an unknown girl. So they got Brando, he was an unknown girl, now I'm out, and I've been doing a lot of tests. So it came for the Marine lieutenant. I said, geez, you know, why can't I play that? And they were going to get John Smith, you know John, the actor. And I kind of undermined old John. I went into Soliviano, who was a talent scout or whatever, and I said, look, couldn't I play that part? And he said, well, I don't know, they're going to get John Smith. And I said, yeah, but couldn't I talk to Josh and Bill Getz about it? He said, well, don't tell them I sent you. You know, so I said, okay. So I went on up, got an appointment this season, and I said, look, fellas, I said, you've seen what I can do in the test. I said, I can play the part, you know, just as well as John, if not better. I said, but the main thing is, I only cost you a couple of $100 a week. And John's going to cost you a lot more than that. And that sold him. So I got the part. And while I was doing that in Japan, they were looking, they had Roy Huggins had come up with the idea for Maverick, and they were looking all over town for somebody to do it, and they had run the gamut, you know, and they couldn't find anybody, so they're looking at the dailies, and they say, well, hell, we got him under contract, let's see if he can do it, you know. So they brought me back from Japan. When I was finished there, the company was still shooting in Japan, but I was finished my work. They finished me a little early and sent me back, and I did the pilot while I was doing Maverick, while I was doing Sayonara. So when I finished with the pilot, well, they were back, and I went back to working Sayonara. And then after I finished Sayonara, well, I was going to do a first feature part in a thing called Darby's Rangers with Charlton Heston. But there was a little mix-up in the contract with Charlton Heston and Mr. Warner, and they had a big argument, and I think a lawsuit, which finally got settled out of court in Mr. Heston's favor. So they came in, Bill Orr and Hugh Benson, and they said, Jim, we want to give you a raise. I said, gee, that's wonderful, you know. And I think at that time I was making, I think I had gone up to $225. In a couple of months I was going to $250 a week. And they said, we want to give you $350 a week. So of course, you know, and by this time I'd used over 2 years of the contract. And so he said, we'll just make it another 7-year contract, you know. And I got to thinking about that, and I figured for $100 a week now, I'm giving up a huge part on the other end. So I said no. And they said, oh, but Jim, you know, we want you to do this. We think you're doing swell. And I said, yeah, well, great, but it ain't worth it, you know. I said, I'm going to make $350 in 2 more months anyway, you know, so what am I doing? For 2 months, I'm giving up a whole bunch. So finally, they agreed to give me $500. Hugh Benson, my good friend, was over there giving me, you know, sticking out his fingers. And because I was doing my own dealing, my agent wasn't doing that much. Such as I didn't even know in the small print that I didn't get residuals, you know, for a television series. When I got the $500 raise, I found out later, much later, that it was $285 a week salary and $215 a week in advance for residuals. So I never got any residuals, and I found that out the hard way. But then I found out nobody at Warner Brothers got residuals, which we may get back to later because I fixed all that. Okay. But anyway, that was on like a Friday. On Monday, I find out that Heston's out of the picture and I'm now starring in it. And then I find out later in the week that they have sold the pilot to Maverick and it's going to be on the air. So they got me pretty cheap.
Jack Warner, Citadel Properties.
My good friend Hugh Benson over there. You can get it, baby. He doesn't realize that later I'm going to find out the truth. So anyway, did Darby's Rangers, and then I went into the first year of Maverick, and I did about, I think 8 or so, and they started shooting so late and they sold it pretty late that I couldn't I couldn't do them all myself. They just didn't have enough time. So that's when they came up with the idea of the brother. And they tested a lot of guys, but none of them got it. They just brought old Jack Kelly out and stuck in front of the camera with me one afternoon, and we just kind of joked around and yacked on camera. And they said, "Okay, fine." And Jack was very good. He's a big help to me. He's just great. And Jack and I got along pretty good. We had a lot of fun. We drove a few directors crazy between the two of us, but or us. And
You said before that you took the Maverick character actually and injected the humor.
yeah, the first three shows, I said they were pretty straight shows, and Bud Bedecker and myself, and then Roy immediately saw it. Roy Huggins, the producer, immediately saw that there's something there. Then he started having the boys write toward it, and he knew what it was about. But no one else at Warner Brothers knew what the series was about. They didn't know what made it click. And Roy had the right idea. It was a tongue-in-cheek, poking fun, don't laugh at us, laugh with us, which is a tremendous difference of some of the things that they did later on, because after 1 year, or 2 years, Roy wanted to get out after the first year of producing it. He wanted, it was his idea originally, and once he gets tired of them, he likes to get out of them. And he wanted to get out the first year, but they wouldn't let him. And the second year, he did get out of it, because he said, "Look, the well's run dry. I can't come up with any more of these ideas." And I was ready to get out of it. I shook him up. And ABC, I remember I just ruined Leonard Goldenson's lunch one day, because we were talking about it, and I said, "Well, I don't know, but the first chance I get out of it, I'm jumping just as fast as I can." And he was like that with the salad, I think, and he never got past that, because they were in a panic when they heard that. But because at that time, let's see, the second year I made $650 a week, no residuals.
Gee.
So, well, compared to the $25,000 a week that Ed Sullivan was getting, and Steve Allen and all those other guys, it wasn't quite
Fair.
not quite fair. But don't worry, Warner's made a few million off of it, and Kaiser sold millions and millions and $1 million worth of foil. They went from something like 6% or 7% of the foil sales up to about 27% of all foil sales. So you can imagine how much that is in aluminum. So anyway, I stayed with it until what were we, in the second year, and then Roy left, and they brought in another producer, and he didn't really understand the humor of it, and I don't think it was his fault. I just think, that I don't think Bill Orr, I know he didn't understand it either, and nor Hugh Benson. So they were trying to do comedy rather than humor, and there is a difference. And they were doing sight gags rather than any tongue-in-cheek or humors. And it was just heavy-handed, and I was getting sick of it, because I found myself doing shtick and funny things, trying to get something into it, that wasn't really there, and I hated it. And also, when you're doing a thing like that, I could see the tenor of the scripts. I could see them going, well, I could see the quality of them just going straight downhill. Well, I'm much more aware of it than anyone else, and long before the public would ever realize it, I realized it. I knew about, like Roy, that at the end of the second year, we were hurting. And then in the third year, we were really in bad shape, but we'd still come up with maybe 1 out of 6 or 7 shows that was good. Well, that's enough to keep an audience going for a year. They say, "Well, that wasn't too good," or "That wasn't." And then about the third week, they get, "Hey, that was good." They're getting back on the good shows again, And then the next one's not too good, the next one, and maybe the next one, and then they say, boy, I don't know, and then they hit them with a good one again, you know, but that's not a very good percentage. Eventually it's going to catch up with you. Well, I could tell it. I mean, we did the same show 3 times. We did 10 Little Indians. It wasn't an original story in the first place. We did 10 Little Indians 3 different times. We did it in the desert, in a deserted house, and on a boat. We just changed the name to protect the innocent, you know. And I got sick of doing the same stories, and not only that, they would take a story from Maverick, change the names and the town, and sometimes they use the same wardrobe because they'd use the same shots and do it on a Cheyenne. And then they would take it from the Cheyenne, cut it down to 30 minutes, and use it on a Colt 45. And these were generally originally old pictures or something that had already been done, so they had all the stock footage for them. It's like, at the end, I think Maverick was budgeted at $105,000, and they never spent over $60,000 on a show yet.
Good Lord.
Because they had all the stock film, they had all the, you know, and all the writers and what have you, stock writers, didn't pay them anything. Stock directors, a lot of the time, I say most of the time, you had stock directors. So, you know, and stock people in the cast, so it wasn't costing them a bloody penny, you know. And that was it. That was really what really killed Warner Brothers Television, was their repetition, and everything was the same. Every one of their detective series were taken from the original 77 Sunset Strip. Now, I'll show you, for instance, I'll tell you what happened. Their detective stories were all taken from 77, right? Cheyenne was their only Western, besides next to Maverick. Maverick and Cheyenne were their 2 Westerns that were really big. The others were copies of other things. Well, Cheyenne was Roy Huggins' original idea and production. Maverick was Roy Huggins' original production and his idea. Sunset Strip was a movie that Roy Huggins wrote, and they did it as a movie, as a pilot, and he produced it, and then he left it after the movie and gave it to someone else to produce. So when Roy Huggins left them, their television went right down the hill, and if you notice, Roy's here, and he has their Run for Your Life, and he has a couple of others too, doesn't he? I think he's got 12 series. He's done 12 series, and all of them, I say basically all of them did well.
Well, that's true, because I saw the demise of television there at Warner's.
Yeah.
It was deathly after.
Yeah. But Roy, for television, is just marvelous. He really has the feel of what the public wants and what they, you know, what will survive and what will do well. But anyway, when he went, they went. They just started going straight downhill, and they were living on that formula, you know, for 3 or 4 years, and then they just like got out of the business. They were just terrible. But they got to be a joke, really, because you just can't do that. You have to progress a little bit, you know, and they didn't progress at all. They were just doing the same old things over and over and over and over. So anyway, one day the writers went on strike, and so there, you know, supposedly a lack of scripts, supposedly. And this is now the 3rd week I had graduated in salary. I mean, the 3rd year. Because I said, okay, boys, that's enough. You know, I did 500 a week the first year, 650 the next year, and so we decided to write a new contract because I'd done 2 pictures on my off time, you know. I did, what was it? Up Periscope and Cash McCall I'd done in the period between when I wasn't making television. So the writers went on strike. Now, we had finished that year's production while they'd been on strike 3 months. And we had finished that year's production of Maverick, and we had done 1 for the next year. And they had a film that they wanted me to do, and they had the script for it. and they were going to do it in April. Well, here it is, the end of February, and they said, gee, you know, he gets a raise the first week in March or something. And I made them a little angry because my doctor had told me after my ulcer, he says, Jim, if, you know, people do things or say things, you know, that you don't like, he says, open your mouth. He said, just tell them about it, you know. He said, blow that steam off. Don't hold it inside. You're going to have ulcers all your life. I said, okay. So I called Bill Orr on the phone. He said, when are you coming to work? I said, I don't know. I'll check with you in a week. The doctor wants me to lay around a week, and then we'll check and see. He said, well, I got a note for production. And he said, what's the matter with you? And I said, well, I've got an ulcer, Bill. And the doctor tells me that ulcers are an executive disease. And I'm not an executive. I'm an actor. You're an executive, and before I'm through, you're going to have that ulcer. And it's true. By the time he left Warner Brothers Television, he was on Librium, he was on everything. So anyway, when they laid me off, which was the March the 3rd, March the 4th, 3rd or 4th, I don't remember. Because of the writer's strike, what they were trying to do was save a little money, you know. And they said, the writer's strike, we can't get scripts, we have nothing for you to do, and well, we just have to lay you off. I said, you can't do that. I got a 52-week contract. I just rewritten it. So they said, oh, yes, we can, Jim. Now, don't be that way. I said, look, don't argue with me about it. We'll talk to my lawyer. So my lawyer said, you're right, Jim, they can't do it. I said that, you know, I used the simile. I said, that's like if somewhere in New Jersey or something, they were making a nut for a lamp, and those guys went on strike, and they couldn't get those nuts for those lamps. They could lay me off. It ain't right. And not only that, but they just, you know, they got inquiries every day, you know, for personal appearances for me all over the country, you know, at as much as $5,000 a day. And I could, you know, offers to go to Australia, to Japan at $25,000 a week and all expenses, you know, and just all kinds of money, you know, and $50,000 appearances at state fairs. And so they, you know, they really could put me to work, and they had me under contract for movies, stage, personal appearances. Well, it read any and all forms of the entertainment business is the way the contract read. So I couldn't do, you know, I could do anything, and yet I couldn't do anything that if I wanted to do it. They had to approve of it. So anyway, my lawyer said, what do you want, Jim? He says, you got them in a bit of a bind. He said, do you want to just, you know, rewrite a new contract and get a bigger salary, or do you want out, or what do you want? I said, I want out. I don't want to work for them. I'd rather, I felt that if I was going to succeed or fail in this business, I wanted it to be my success or my failure. I didn't want to come up when I'm 50 years old and say, you know, I could have had a damn good career, but Warner Brothers put me in these pictures, and they were bad pictures, and it ruined my career. You don't want to. I don't want to blame it on somebody else if I succeed. But if I should succeed, I want the credit. I did it. You know, it was my decisions and this, that, and the other. And I don't know. It's the way I am. So I told him I wanted out. He said, "Okay, it makes a difference in how I word it." So he sent them a letter, which infuriated them, to the degree that you're in breach of Mr. Garner's contract, and if you do not put him back on salary as of last March the 3rd or 4th, says we will declare you in breach, and Mr. Garner will gain employment elsewhere. And he worded just so, just made them furious, you know. So they sent a letter back saying we're not in breach, and you know, anyway, that Mr. Garner is still under contract, and that's all we needed. Because at that moment, we had given them a chance to straighten the whole thing out, which they didn't do. And we pointed out to them why. which you have to do. It's otherwise they can say, "Oh, geez, we're sorry, you know, we didn't mean to do that," and then I'm still under contract. So they had laid off 3 people. They laid off me, Jack Kelly, and Clint Walker. So Jack Kelly called and he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I just sent a letter to my lawyer and I told him what happened." So he got his lawyer, who called my lawyer, and they got the, you know, he said, "What did you do?" And my lawyer told him what to do, and so he did it. Well, they couldn't leave me off salary and put him back on, so they did the same thing to Jack. So then Clint Walker said, "Gee, what are these guys doing?" You know, so he called, I told him. His lawyer did the same thing. Now Warner Brothers saying, "Oh boy, I think we got ourselves in a bind. We're going to lose Maverick, we're going to lose the Cheyenne series, we got the whole thing going." They decided maybe we better back up a little here. So they took Clint Walker and put him back on salary. But they said we retain the right to come back and open this up later, you know, which they couldn't do anyway. But anyway, they were trying to protect themselves. So now I took the first job that was offered me, which was a personal appearance in Albuquerque or wherever, I don't remember. Warner Brothers did not try to seek an injunction, which we were trying to do. I was trying to take some personal appearances or something, so they would seek an injunction so we could go to the court right then and there. But they didn't fall for a trap like that. They harassed the producers of whatever it was that I was doing. Let's say we will sue you. You are using our client. We'll sue you for everything you have if you hire Mr. Garner, and he's our property, and so on and so on. And I guaranteed them against any suits trying to bring it to a head, but they didn't do it. And then I took some summer stock because I had to work. And hell, I made more money in 8 weeks in summer stock than I would have made under contract to Warner Brothers for the year. And they harassed the producers of these plays, the summer stock plays, and they also threatened the newspapers, let's say not threatened them outright to the point of getting in a lawsuit, but the newspapers knew that Warner Brothers would pull all their advertising if they hired me. So the newspapers in New Haven, the newspapers in Oklahoma City, would not take any advertising on personal appearance on me. But we broke the house record in New Haven, so it was all right.
What play did you do?
John Loves Mary.
Oh.
Just, you know, a little comedy. I hadn't done a play in years, you know. I hadn't done it since Kane Mutiny Court March. It was only really the first that kind of play I'd done, so I wanted to do something that I was fairly certain. And hell, the play came off good. It was a pretty good little play.
It's a nice play.
It's a good little play, and
Yeah.
funny, it held up very good. We got marvelous reviews. I remember in Boston, and where else were we? Oh God, we were up in Toronto. We got good reviews all over down Cleveland, or not Cleveland, Warren, Ohio. And reviews all over down Cleveland, or not Cleveland, Warren, Ohio. And so anyway, I did that. We finally got to court, and I won the lawsuit, which was literally just my freedom. And they had to pay me the 1 week's salary that they owed me. And I was free. So I immediately I was sent script by 20th, Columbia, and MGM.
You had no problem with the Maverick hangover?
Well, now this was a problem. This is the one that shook me up a little bit. I was a little worried that, you know, one reason I want to get out of it was because of this type thing people see on television. Now will they pay to see in the movies? But I left it at a time the audience was still hot on Maverick. If the audience had seen what I saw coming, that it was going downhill, had I stayed with it the full 5 years, I was only with it 3 years, the audience would have eventually, by the end of 5 years, saying, "Gee, that show was terrible." I'm getting sick of him. Well, they would have been not only sick of the series, they'd have been sick of me.
Yeah.
But I left it as Steve McQueen did, when it was still a popular show. Therefore, I still have a good image. And people come up to me today and said, "Gee, I loved it in that series." Said, "When are you ever going to do that again?" And I said, "No, because now I have a good image with him. But if I'd stayed with it till he went downhill, I'd have a bad image with him." So after I won, before I went to court, they went to Jack Kelly and offered him a raise to come back, and he took it, and he went back before I went to court. And he called me and he said, "Jim, look, I'm going back, and I want you to know, I said, "Jack, you got to do what you got to do, and I have to do what I do. Just don't worry about it. You protect yourself." So he was very good about it, and he knew that might weaken my position. If we both held out, then they're really in a bind. But if only one hold out, well, didn't bother me. I told Jack to do what he thought he ought to do, And so anyway, he stayed with it, and I left, and so I was concerned about the image, but I always felt that I still had a good image with the public, and I would like to do other things, and I had to find out. So, as I say, I was sent 3 scripts, and one for a television series, which was funny. So I read them, and one was kind of half interested, and I was half interested in it. About a week later, no scripts. They were withdrawn, and I couldn't figure out what the devil was the matter. Well, without ever being able to prove it, somebody, somewhere, had told somebody, "Don't hire him." Now, I would not say who, where, when, or how, because I don't know. If I did know, I could own most of the studios with a lawsuit.
Yeah.
But anyway, they were more or less withdrawn, and then I was sent a script by 20th, and I turned it down first, and then I found out Gary Cooper was going to do the other part, and I said, "Send it back." Because if he's going to do it, it was something I didn't know. And Doug Hayes, whom I knew very well, had written the script and was going to direct it at this time. And I said, "What are you going to do with it, Doug?" And he told me, so it looked good to me. It was really a transformation of the Maverick character, and in this script, he went to a different kind of character. He changed his whole life, so I thought it might be a good transition. And with Coop, it'd be a good Western. It was the Comancheros. Well, the director wanted me, the producer wanted me, they had the executive producer of the studio wanted me. Everything was set. The lawyers said no, he can't be touched, because there was an appeal by Warner Brothers at this point. And said he can't be touched. He's perfectly free to work. My lawyers had said it, an outside lawyer had said it, and we guaranteed them against any lawsuit. So they sent it to New York, to, I guess, Spiros Skouras. And that's the last we ever heard of it. We didn't get any more communiques from 20th. Somebody said no.
Good.
But it got that far, and then cut. So anyway, the Mirish people, we had called them, my agent called them Bob Coryell. I've changed agents by this time, by the way. I did it in the second year of Maverick. That's when I got the raise. As a matter of fact, they went in and got me a new raise and a new contract and the whole thing, which was considerably better in the last year. Not what I should have been getting, but it was better. So we called Mirish about Two for the Seesaw. We knew they owned the property and thought, might be interested in doing it. And they weren't too hot on that, but they said, brought to mind, me to their mind, about Children's Hour of Willie Wyler. and said, would he do the part? And I said, yeah. So I went out and talked to Willie Wyler, and he wanted me, and so I did the part. And that broke the ice. Once the studio hired me, then there was no blackballing, because then they said, well, everybody, if they're going to use him, we can use him, and nobody was offended. And Mirish really broke the ice there. Because I do know of people who got into a little bit of trouble. Marty Ransoff got in a little bit of trouble by hiring me in the next film. But then it just kept breaking down, and nobody paid any attention to it. And in the meantime, I was doing different things, and I think I've gotten away from it now. People refer to me more now as Jim Garner rather than Maverick, and it takes a period of time, because those films are still on, they're still running around. They've been shown time after time after time, and so here I am. We did a few pictures. I've done, I think, something like 18 or 19 films. I don't really know. I've never really counted them.
Well, you're one of the there's very few that made the transition.
That's it. I think you're about the only one that made it.
No, Steve.
Steve,
Yeah, Steve started in Wanted Dead or Alive,
Yeah.
as far as films go. I mean, and he started in television. He was very hot in television, and
Yeah, that's right.
well, he only signed a 2-year contract or something, and boy, when it was over, he got out. And he was right.
Well, it is rather distinction. I don't think more than really two that really established maybe.
No,
Star rank.
But I think there's probably a few other people around that could have done it if the timing was right. I think mine was just pure luck, that the writers went on strike when they do it. Oh, that's something else. Warner Brothers laid me off on the 4th of March, and on the 7th of March, the actors were going on strike anyway. So for the sake of either 3 or 4 days' salary,
Gee, yeah, sure it's not.
so it's luck and timing, All they had to do was wait 3 or 4 days, and hell, I had to go on strike with the union anyway.
Yeah, salary.
So it didn't make any difference, yeah.
As far as the screen roles are concerned, which of those you have liked best? Or
The one I liked best was The Americanization of Emily.
Good.
It was the best script, and I thought Julie was fantastic, and I got a great sense of satisfaction out of it because of Jim Coburn.
Yeah.
I literally got him the role in the film, and of course I had help from John Calley, who is producer for Filmways under Marty Ransohoff. He does a lot of films for Ransohoff. And John agreed with me, and so between the two of us, I pushed Coburn for the part, and John sided with me, saying he could do it. And so between the two of us, we got Coburn the role, and he went from there, zip. He had done a couple of pictures with Sturgis. He'd done The Magnificent Seven, and then he was in The Great Escape. That's where I met Jim. And in little nothing roles, he was just kind of a standout, and I thought he was marvelous, So that was one of the great satisfactions of it. But the picture itself, the theme of it, what it said, Chayefsky's writing, I just loved. I thought it was marvelous. I thought it was a much better film than it was received, and it was received pretty well. It's received better than people think it was, because I think most people feel, like I do, that it was a good film, but there wasn't that much ballyhoo about it.
No,
But the film did a lot of business,
Should we give you a ring when you
which I don't know why. Well, like in that year, I think it was either the fifth biggest moneymaker of the year,
Fine, thank you.
and people didn't know it. Why, I don't know, because Marty Ransohoff is really, most of Marty Ransohoff is publicity. He hasn't done that many films, and not that many good ones, but you think about it, you think he'd been in the industry and done 40 films, but he hasn't. It's a lot of publicity, which brings him up on the top level. I did his first 3 films.
We were dealers.
Americanization of Emily was his 3rd film. I did it. I did the thing with Kim Novak, and I don't remember the name of it.
First one? Wheeler Dealers the first one?
No, the one before that
Oh.
with Kim Novak and
Oh.
the three guys, Howard Morris, Howard Duff, and
All right.
Tony Randall. But
347.
we, what was I talking about? The darn phones are worrying me. Yeah, well, anyway, that was my favorite film. I think The Great Escape, I must go back to The Children's Hour, which was the break for me from television. And I owe an awful lot to Willie Wyler, because to do a film, it was a thankless role. It was a very difficult role, because it's a weak character, which nobody, really associates me with. With Audrey Hepburn, Shirley MacLaine, Willie Wyler directing, took me out of a television cowboy role into that kind of atmosphere was a tremendous jump. So it was the smartest move I could have made to do that film. It was just for the association with that kind of people. And I could have jumped right into B pictures like that, with no problem at all. Because if Mirish hadn't have done what they did, if they hadn't have made that move and defied whoever or whatever the kind of sort of reticence there was in the industry to hire me, then I could still be looking for work. But they did, and I made a 3-picture deal with them, and they turned out to be that picture, The Great Escape, and Day of the Guns, which I had just finished. And I would say that was the first move I made. Then Great Escape turned out to be just a great thing. And then the next one was The Thrill of It All with Doris Day, which was a really fine comedy.
Yeah.
I think was one of the best light comedy. I think it's the best that Doris has ever done. She was just fantastic in the picture. She did some marvelous thing. And it was Norman Jewison's first picture. And he did a beautiful job of directing that film. And then I think from there was Americanization of Emily was my favorite overall of them. And then I don't know. I haven't done anything since Americanization that I'm that proud of. You keep looking and you keep looking. I must say that Day of the Guns is a damn good Western. It really is. It was an old commitment. And that's one of those things where you say, well, okay, it's not a bad script. And I like John Sturges. I think he's marvelous. I love to work with him. He respects actors, and we get to work together a lot, So I said, we work it out, and it turned out good. And we got Jason Robards in it, who is just marvelous. And so anyway, we did the film, and of course it hadn't been released yet, but I am damned proud of the film. I just think it's a hell of a good Western. I've been very fortunate. I've had all the really good leading ladies.
What do you look for as far as the part is concerned now?
I don't. I read the script, and if I like it, if I think it's, well, first, I have to like it. And I have to like the character, whether, I don't mean like him, I don't think he has to be a great guy, anything, but it has to be a good character, if I think I can play him. Then I have to look at it to see, well, what's the overall film, can you transfer it from the script into a film and what it'll look like? And then, will they buy it? Because you can make the greatest film in the world if the audience, for yourself, if the audience doesn't like it, it's to me it's no good. Because we're still in the entertainment business anyway we look at it, I think film directors who say, like I've heard Dick Lester say, I make films for myself. Well, he can make them for himself, and he can go home and look at them, If the people don't buy them, then it's somebody's going to go broke. So I always look at it, see if it's going to be profitable. If you're not going to